Alright, thanks for watching and welcome to this special episode of Dr. Peyam. Today I would like to talk to you about a topic which probably concerns most of us, at least in the US, which is the US Census. As you may or may not know, the next census is coming up on April 1st, 2020. No, not an April Fool's joke. And it's very important because it's held only once every 10 years. So it's super important that you please fill one out and make sure your voice is counted. Because in math, we like countable sets. Now, what's a census, you might ask? It's basically a survey which you fill out and you answer basic questions about yourself. Like, how old are you? Or how many children are in your household? Or what's the highest level of education that you've completed? And all your answers will be sent to the US Census Bureau, which collects all the data and then sends it to the US government. And that's super useful because then the government can decide how to allocate its funds. For example, suppose in Orange County there are more children. Then it would create more schools there. If, let's say, in Alameda County there's more retired people, then it would open up more retirement homes. And it's also useful in Congress to determine the number of congressional seats, which is sort of proportional to the population in each state. And the Congress, I believe, just makes the laws, so it's very important legislator. Alright, but that's not quite why we're here today. We're here because I want to show you this really cool website called census.gov/schools. And on this website, there are lots of cool activities which not only show you that the census is important, but also teach you some cool math and stats. And what's especially neat about this is that all the data is taken from the census, which first of all illustrates how important it is to fill one out, because you literally see sort of the answers of at least the questions from 10 years ago. And also what I like is the data is pretty recent. And personally, I find that so useful because when I took a stats class 12 years ago, I used a stats book, which shall not be named, where the author would sort of introduce a concept, just brute force with a formula, and then use some data from the 1940s, which I don't even know what they were trying to calculate. So they use what's called the Bible data. No idea. And even worse, it would just use that example over and over and over again. So I was just more and more confused. But not with this website. So let's delve right in, look at the activities. So of course math, because I like math, right? And so there are a bunch of activities listed if you want by grades or by topics, like one where you apply correlation coefficients, one where you make box plots to calculate commute time using data from commuting time, and one where you, really cool one actually, where you use the normal distribution to sort of sort the retirement age. And this one especially explains why the standard deviation is important in normal distributions. So pretty regular statistics topics. Today, because that formula just jumped in my eye, we'll do the one on applying correlation coefficients. And the way each activity is set up, it has a description with materials required and some learning objectives, so everyone is on the same page. And very cool things. First of all, a student version, which just has the questions and activities you can work together on. And then the teacher version with answers and also comments on how to teach it. And lastly, some real-life examples of how your answers are actually, reflected in the real world. So basically, in this activity, we will see that using the correlation that, let's say, having a higher education degree actually turns out to sort of minimize unemployment. So people with a higher degree are less likely to be unemployed. And in fact, this is what this illustrates, where we can really see how people, again, with a higher degree, or like people, I guess, with a lower degree are more likely to unemployed. Like you're working without a high school diploma. Before I do the activity, I want to answer a question that some people ask me. So someone asked me, how would a teacher or a parent use those activities? First of all, as a teacher, I highly recommend this because it uses real life data. So it doesn't use data that's archaic or something, but something people can actually feel, and it's very recent. And also, as I said, something people feel. So for example, all of us can imagine what unemployment feels like. So really, it's a very accurate worksheet. And also, it promotes active learning, which basically means you put people in groups and make them, create the questions and answer them. It's a bit vague, but you will understand that in this video. And also, again, let's say you wanna you want to illustrate a topic. You want to sort of illustrate correlation coefficients. Then you can just use this worksheet as more examples and to get a feel of how to use this. Now, as a parent, you might be like, I don't know any statistics. How would I be able to teach it? Don't worry, this worksheet is so cleverly designed, and you can really see they put so much work in this to really make it as easy for you to explain to your kids what those concepts are. So all you need to do is follow this teacher version and you will understand it, I promise. And here's a cool thing, not only will you learn statistics, but also you will understand why it's so important to fill out the census. So definitely check this one out. Okay, now without further ado, let's look at the student version. So the questions and answers. And again, what this is trying to illustrate is how to use correlation coefficients to answer a very important question about the correlation between a degree of education and unemployment. And again, what's nice is the students can see the objectives, so they will know what they'll learn. Again, very active learning-esque. And they have those activities. So, and the activities, as I said, not just random data that's related to the census. For example, unemployment rates by educational attainment. Let's look at this data. So let's scroll back to the end. Alright. Now, if you look at this table, again, something that affects all of us, which is, well, awesome, but unemployment is not awesome, so sort of medium. And what it does, it shows the unemployment rate by state and also depending on your education level. So for example, in California, 7.1% of people are unemployed. And more importantly, notice if you don't have a high school diploma, no GED, then the chance of you being unemployed is almost 10%, which is pretty high. But the more educated you are, notice the less likely it is that you're unemployed. Let's say if you have a bachelor's degree or higher, then in California you only have a 4.4% of being unemployed. And very important for this activity, notice this is sort of uniform across all states. So in Alabama, if you have a bachelor's degree, you're less likely to be unemployed than having a high school degree. Having not even a high school degree. So kids, please stay in school, right? You can already see being educated is great, and especially not only in school, you can stay in college. That's very important. All right. Now, again, let's go back to this activity. So we saw this data, okay? And what's really cool about this worksheet is it's not just ask you to answer questions. It kind of asks you to make your own questions. For example, what's one thing you noticed? Well, you noticed that higher education is correlated with lower unemployment, and then you actually write a question that you want to investigate. So, for example, let's investigate, does higher education have something to do with lower employment? And it's very cool. It's, again, very active learning-y because you sort of guide the lesson plan. It's not like a teacher that teaches you to do it. And especially, as a parent, also very useful. And because, in my opinion, it's like you have the answer to your own questions, right? That's sort of the philosophy of it. And not only that, it brings you it groups you in a think, pair, share strategy where you can just share your answers with people in your group and then sort of work as a team on a question that you want to answer. Like choose interesting questions that your group could investigate. Again, which is how it's done in industry, right? You usually work in teams on a question that you or your boss formulates. So another reason why this worksheet is awesome, it kind of gives you a taste of industry. And then it delves more in the stats part. Notice so far, no math yet, just stats. And one thing that's nice about this worksheet, it kind of nudges you into the math. Because even though I know I like math and you like math, most people don't like math, unfortunately. But this one kind of, maybe not like, they're scared of math, let's say that. And I feel this worksheet kind of deals with this fright, with the state of being frightened, right? And then it kind of soothes people into the math. So here's some plots, and you may notice they look different, and it seems those values are more closely together, and those values are mostly together, whereas those ones are kind of random. And in fact, the next activity asks you to illustrate this with numbers, you see? We say, suppose we calculate what's called the correlation coefficient, and we have those numbers. Which ones do you think are associated with which graph? So, for instance, 0.94, which means how things are close together, might be associated either to this graph or this graph. So you see, without even calculating or using the definition of the correlation coefficient, I can already sort of give you some intuition behind it. It's some measure that says, well, things' values are kind of related. And notice, again, no math yet, okay? Now that you feel the problem is important and that you relate to it, we can slowly introduce the math. So here it is. Ooh, I know. Scary formula. And in fact, when I learned statistics, they would just give this formula at the beginning. And I was very scared of it, right? Not even scared, I was actually skip it because I personally have an index phobia. So once I see this index, I would be like, okay, let's move on, okay? And they use that Bible data. But here, no. What's really cool about this sheet is simply, not only does it give you the formula, but it also guides you through it. It tries to demystify it by, first of all, using some simplified data. So assume we take all the data from before, focus just on associate's degree, and sort of separate it by, northeast, midwest, south, and west. Sort of orientation or something. And it says, well, instead of doing this formula all at once, let's slowly calculate each value. So let's calculate xi minus the average, yi minus the average, multiply that, square that, sum those values, take the square root, and then just use this formula a over b times c. which is sort of the skeleton of this formula. Notice it is A over B times C, but where this is like a dot product, so sum of products, and this is like a norm, square root of sum of squares. So I really like it. It's sort of like an art picture. Instead of like just dealing with this at once, we sort of deconstruct this picture into, beautiful constituents, and we'll see how nice this formula is. Again, unlike other statistics things I've seen. So as an educator, I think this is pretty awesome. This is why, let's say, as a teacher, you would use it. And again, as a parent, you can teach it to your kids, and also maybe learn to deal with your math phobia. So that's good. And then after some questions, it gives a more qualitative way of looking at it. Like, let's look at this value where things are spread out. What do you think the correlation coefficient becomes? Like, what's the largest R value, the smallest R value? Or with this scatter plot, let's say it's like the values are very close to each other. What do you think will the value of R be? And would outliers matter? Or something. Then it again asks you to calculate the correlation coefficients. And the cool thing is, now that you have some feel for it, this actually gives you a hands-on example of doing your own correlation, own scatter plots. So this one is sort of like exploration topic where you create your own scatter plot and you can determine the correlation coefficient. So again, that's really unlike any other things I've seen. And again, which by the way, it's the way it's used in industry, right? Because in industry, we don't give you scatter plots. You do it yourself with the data. And this is like a mini industry version, which I think is really cool. And again, what if we have more complicated data? Because again, when do you see 4 points in real life? Unless it's like a parallelogram. No, not even a parallelogram. Quadrilateral. I think that's what it's called. And lastly, here's a cool thing about it. Remember the question you asked at the beginning? Here you actually answer it. So based on all the things you've seen, you can actually answer, is higher level of education correlated with lower unemployment? And you can see, well, actually it pretty much is. And in particular, it not only helps you absorb what a correlation coefficient is, but it actually shows you, well, this data is pretty important, and in particular it shows you that, well, the census data is useful. So you're definitely not wasting your time filling one out. That's really what I want to say. So this concludes this activity, and again, you're welcome to look at it some more. Let me see. All right, and then maybe let's now go back to the general website. Let's see if I can zoom. Perfect, I can zoom in. And then what I just want to illustrate are some other fun things. So there's more activities here, and there are more resources, like here, data access tools, where you can sort of analyze any data you want with those tools, and some games, in fact, as well. Like, there's one really fun one, I think. So there's one, it's called Counting Way, and it's actually a song about the census, which you should check out. I don't know if I can click on it due to copyright reasons, but you should try it out if you want. And other things like a bracketology, like March Madness, if you like that kind of things. And also a coloring book. So don't laugh at this. It's actually pretty useful because coloring books have been shown to be very a good use of meditation. And personally, I really need lots of meditation in my job because it's pretty stressful. But what you do, you can just do some fun activities related to the census, like draw everyone living at your home, or compare this house with this house, and then maybe color people on the form. Again, don't laugh at it, it's very useful. And let's see if we can get out of it. Yes. So you can check this out. And lastly, what I wanted to say, there's this really cool thing also, because so far we only dealt with data from previous censuses, but there's also some cool worksheet related to the 2020 census, which you should definitely check out, like this one, K-12 activities. Again, just like the previous worksheets. And there's one that really stood out for me. It's this one, the census questionnaire then and now. And what it does, it compares the 2000 census with the 1900 census. So you can actually learn how people counted other people in the 1900s. And that really impressed me, because actually basically I didn't know people in the 1900s were so smart. So they had a really clever system, which is different from today's system, but today's system is still clever as well. Alright, so that's all I wanted to say about this website. Last thing I wanted to say though is, because I'm doing this video in October, and you may ask why in October if the census is in April. Well, it turns out this week, so the week of October 21st, is the nationwide census recruiting campaign, which basically recruits workers, like census takers, to ensure a complete and accurate census. So if you need a part-time job, or if you're just looking for ways to get involved, please visit this website, 2020census.gov, and they give you, /jobs, and they give you ways to apply for a job. Or you can go to usajobs.gov and click on census, and it's also a useful website to apply for jobs. Alright, that's all I wanted to say about the census. Yeah, please make sure to fill one out or get involved. And if you like that and you want to see more math, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.